In the late spring of 1994, I made my only ever scrapbook. It was a celebration of Aston Villa's Coca-Cola Cup run that season, which ended with victory at Wembley over a Manchester United side that would otherwise have won a domestic treble. Copied, etched and printed into that scrapbook were newspaper cuttings and my own annotations of Villa's progress under Ron Atkinson. In the second round, they beat lower division rivals Birmingham City 1-0 away and then 1-0 at home. These were the first derby matches I knew, and they were tough as nails. Even now, when the two teams meet relatively frequently, this is a rivalry that spills over into a hatred I'm not entirely comfortable with. Back then, they were rare, and it showed. The first leg could have ended differently. Birmingham's John Frayne, born in the city, had a first-half penalty saved by Mark Bosnich, and Villa skipper Kevin Richardson clipped in the winner after meeting a fine lofted pass from Steve Staunton. In the second, at Villa Park, Villa's Dean Saunders missed his hitter, and the visitors squandered a number of chances of their own. City's Paul Tate, who seemed tormented by his hatred of Villa throughout the 1990s, was sent off for shoving Richardson into the Villa supporters after the pair clashed near the touchline. Richardson was no angel, but Tate's response might have cost his team dear. The game was won when Saunders finally took his chance to make it 2-0 on aggregate, nudging the ball around the goalkeeper and sliding in an assured finish. On the television commentary, Jimmy Greaves was adamant he was offside. In fact, the previous touch had come off a Birmingham player in a tackle deep in the Villa half. Villa went on to thrash Sunderland at Roker Park in the single-legged third round, and were away again as they saw off Arsenal with a 1-0 win at Highbury in the fourth. Villa were drawn away in every round, except for the final. The quarter-final took them to White Hart Lane, where a 2-1 win set up a semi-final tie that had everything cup football could ever hope to offer. ITV presenter Matt Lorenzo said before the semi-final first leg that Johnny King's Tranmere Rovers versus Aston Villa might be the biggest game ever played at Prenton Park. The stadium, which opened as Tranmere's home ground in 1912 and remains so to this day, was packed out by 17,000 supporters around a rain-soaked pitch. Despite the suspension of two key defenders, Tranmere were brilliant. With Pat Nevin and John Aldridge flanking Chris Malkin in a front three, Rovers played modern, ambitious, attacking, passing football in the first half. Villa barely got a kick. In the second, Tranmere were able to repel the pressure put on them by the visiting Premier League side, and to score the goal to get themselves into a 3-0 lead. After the match, Villa manager Atkinson felt his team, unbeaten in 7 games prior to kick-off, started well but collapsed when Tranmere scored after just 6 minutes. Nevin's clever run ended with a fortunate ricochet that took the ball into the path of Ian Nolan, who blasted it in off a crossbar at the near post, scoring his first goal for 2 seasons in the process. Villa folded, Tranmere took advantage. Mark Hughes, playing as a sweeper, made it 2-0 with a sensational strike. Rovers had a second corner in quick succession, and Hughes won the aerial challenge. As the ball rebounded back towards him, he steadied himself and lobbed an improvised volley that kissed the bar on the way into the far corner. Villa goalkeeper Bosnich was utterly helpless. The second half was very different. Villa's profligacy became their main shortcoming as they pushed the home team further and further towards Eric Nixon's goal. But it was Tranmere who scored the tie's third. Kenny Irons curved a beautiful pass to reward the fabulous movement of John Aldridge, who was either just onside or just off, depending on who you ask. Aldridge raced clear, and his first effort cannoned back off Bosnich's near post. He tucked in the second with ease. Villa's late lifeline was a controversial one. With the tie heavily favouring Tranmere at 3-0, TV commentator Alan Parry described the mountain Villa would have to climb in the second leg as Eiger-like in its proportions. 3-1 though, different story. Daly and Atkinson's goal was a cruel and controversial stoppage-time blow for Tranmere. Irons fouled Andy Townsend. Roger Milford's decision was harsh, according to Parry's co-commentator David Pleat, and he's not alone. And Richardson's free kick was butted back to the penalty spot by Tony Daly. Atkinson smacked in the volley to make it 3-1. Johnny King, speaking after the match, agreed with Pleat's assessment of the original free kick decision and also pointed out that Malkin had been fouled in the air trying to defend it. Nevertheless, he was proud of his team and rightly said they had deserved their 3-0 lead. I can't say how that goal changed the tie in the eyes of Tranmere supporters at the time. For Villa fans, it was huge. It made the second leg challenge seem eminently manageable. There's no doubt it was the most important of the 8 goals scored in this semi-final. I can remember the second leg like it happened yesterday. I sat in the upper tier of the Trinity Road stand with my dad and I just knew that it was doable. It was Villa's day from start to finish, With luck and lenience on their side, they were too much for this wonderful Tranmere team. The man in the spotlight from a Tranmere point of view was Bosnich, Villa's goalkeeper, whose impact on the second leg can't be ignored. He was fantastic when called upon, but that barely scratches the story's surface. It was Saunders whose early input made the first dent in King's hull. With nearly 20 minutes gone, Townsend sent in a low cross that Saunders met at the near post, turning it past Nixon with two Tranmere defenders snapping at his heels. Just a few minutes later it was 2-0 on the day, and it came from a free kick again. The ball was rolled to Richardson, who crossed deep to set up a diving header by defender Sean Teal. His celebration remains one of the most famous in Villa's history. And just a few minutes after that, the moment Tranmere fans lament even now. Aldridge went clear again, his movement far too sharp for Villa's high line. This time he was fouled by Bosnich. The Australian should have been sent off. There's an argument that he had cover, but I think he would have scored before those Villa defenders got their blocks in. Bosnich wasn't even booked. It should really have been red. I would only admit that all these years later. All I know is that my heart was in my mouth in 1994. Aldridge's penalty was nerveless and emphatic. It's funny how the mind plays tricks on you. In mine, Villa got the job done relatively comfortably in the second half, save for a late scare that we'll come on to shortly. I just can't get my head around the fact that Daly and Atkinson's winner came so late in the day. With 87 minutes and 57 seconds on the clock, Villa went 3-1 up and levelled the tie on aggregate. Atkinson robbed Hughes in midfield and was immediately fouled by the Tranmere man. Villa tried to take a quick free kick out to Daly on the right wing, but the ball was moving and they were called back. Then, with the ball finally dead, they took their quick free kick anyway. Daly crossed to the near post, Atkinson nodded the ball home, and Villa Park nearly came off its foundations. And so to the late scare. Tranmere nearly won the tie at the death. In stoppage time, Liam O'Brien swung a 25-yard free kick against the post, with Bosnich beaten. With both teams exhausted, extra time was a bust, and the game went to a penalty shootout. Bosnich was the hero and villain, of course. He saved from Jed Brennan, O'Brien and Nolan. Villa went on, and Tranmere went out. The nearly men once more as their extraordinary progress under King reached its ceiling in the mid-1990s. That referee Milford apologised to King in the aftermath of his crucial first leg decision is a brutal twist in the tale. 1994 also saw the departure to Everton of Tranmere's chairman and one-time saviour Peter Johnson, whose support made the trip to the moon a possibility in the first place. So began Tranmere's slow process of waking from the dream. The following season, King and Tranmere finished fifth, yet again qualifying for the playoffs with hopes of claiming a place in the still young Premier League. This time, Reading defeated them over 2 legs in the semi-final. There were good spells for Rovers in 1994-95, most notably a 6-match unbeaten run in the league in the spring, and it might have turned out better for them, but they flaked, badly, late in the season. In the end, they were 6 points short of first place and would have been within touching distance of automatic promotion in any other season, 1995 being the year the Premier League was reduced from 22 teams to 20. The poor run of form started with a 5-0 loss against Derby County, followed by a home loss to Southend United and another heavy defeat, 5-1 on this occasion, at West Bromwich Albion. They went into the playoffs on the back of 2 home draws, but the damage was done. They were unable to pick themselves up when it counted. They lost 3-1 at Reading in the first leg and drew again at Prenton Park in the second. In 1995-96, Tranmere finished in mid-table, 12 points away from the playoff semi-final they'd previously reached 3 years in a row. They were also only 7 points clear of relegation in an unbelievably tight second tier, winning only 1 match more than relegated Millwall as their world shifted beneath their feet. The tide had turned. In April 1996, King was moved upstairs and replaced by John Aldridge, perhaps his greatest signing ever, who made sure the threat of relegation was avoided, just as King had done in 1987. Aldridge's signing was classic King. The long-standing Tranmere gaffer reportedly called Aldridge's wife to persuade her to persuade him to return to Merseyside from Real Sociedad. And little wonder. King viewed his target as a truly world-class striker. He could have scored second-tier goals in his sleep. Signing Aldridge was a statement of intent as much as a practical acquisition of guaranteed goals. King was a talker, an engaging and energetic one at that, and he wanted to make Tranmere Merseyside's real third team. And when he said that, he meant in the Premier League. My favourite nugget of anecdotal King knowledge comes from his captain, Eric Nixon, who once told journalist Nick Hilton about being called into King's office and subjected to a typical battle cry. "I've seen a bird, Nico, on the end of my ship," raved King. "The best thing about the bird is that it has a twig in its mouth. You know what that means? It means we're near land. What I want you to do now is to go back to that squad and tell each and every player to grab an oar and row as hard as they can for the shore. I want them all to be like Kirk Douglas in that movie, The Vikings. With a dance to demonstrate, the rallying call was over. Just another day at the Rovers." King's oratory frequently took a nautical turn. In terms of his way with words, he was an eccentric. But he was also a proud man of Birkenhead and one hell of a football manager. He saw himself as a leader. He loved winning and hated losing, he said. But the truth is, he was a manager of style too. He spoke very highly of the players he had at his disposal, a team he'd built in the first half of the 1990s. He admired their ability to slice open a defence. Now, nearly 30 years on, I admire that too. What a team they were. So it's no surprise that King is clearly adored by supporters of Tranmere Rovers. They love him for his teams and the attacking football they played, for their ability to score lots of goals, for his playing Pat Nevin practically as a forward, a stroke of aggressively ambitious genius, for making Wembley their second home, and for nearly taking a club from the Wirral to the Premier League. In a very real sense, John King was Tranmere's Shankly. And he held Bill Shankly in some esteem. In King's mind, the iconic Liverpool manager occupied a curious position. King counted Shankly as a friend, but when he spoke about his friend on camera, his eyes would light up, revealing the extent to which he looked up to him as an otherworldly influence on football. When King turned down the role of manager at Sheffield Wednesday, it was Shankly who'd recommended him. According to King, Shankly's response was to suggest that Wednesday could be a rocket bound for the moon, with nobody to fly it. Now where have we heard that before? In 2014, a group of Johnny King's former players attended a dinner organised by the Tranmere Rovers Supporters Trust and the Tranmere Rovers Former Players Foundation. The objective of the event was to raise funds for the King statue that stands proudly at the corner of Prenton Park today, which was in the process of being created by the sculptor Tom Murphy. It makes me happy that King was celebrated in this way, able to enjoy it, before he passed away in 2016. It was seeing that statue for the first time that turned my passing interest in my dad's new local club into a real affection for Tranmere. By the time I attended a game at Prenton Park, they were a non-league team, having slipped down the divisions in the intervening years. They did reach the League Cup final, eventually, losing to Leicester City in 2000. Villa lost the FA Cup final that same year. Villa's win over Rovers in the 1994 League Cup semi-final came to be rivalled as my favourite ever football match by Tranmere's winning the Vanarama National League promotion final, playoff final, to you and me, in 2018. Again, it was being there at Wembley with my dad that made that really special. Tranmere Rovers became a shared experience for us, just as Bournemouth and Villa have been in the past. You can't replace those memories, just like you can't replace football's biggest characters and most romantic stories. And when it comes to characters with a story to tell, there's only one Johnny King. One Johnny King was written and produced by me, Chris Nee, for Sphinx Football. My thanks and acknowledgement to the people whose work has informed this episode along with my own, namely Ryan Ferguson and Planet Prentonia, Port Vale historian Phil Sherwin, Gil Upton and Steve Wilson, the authors of Tranmere Rovers 1921 to 1997, A Complete Record, and Nick Hilton. Visit sphinxfootball.com for all of our podcasts.